Close your eyes for a moment and imagine waking to the soft patter of rain against the glass. For you, that sound is almost a lullaby. It only slows the morning down, wraps itself around a steaming cup of tea, pulls a blanket a little tighter over your shoulders, and asks nothing urgent of you. But for a human being alive tens of thousands of years ago, that same gentle sound rang out like an alarm. It meant the hunt was already over before it began. It meant the fire, the one thing standing between them and the dark, had to be watched every single minute. And it meant the coming days would quietly decide who lived to see the next season and who would not. We like to picture prehistoric life as one long chase, people forever running, hunting, fleeing danger, never still for a moment. But the researchers who spend their careers tracing the footprints of ancient campsites keep uncovering something that stops people in their tracks. Most of what truly shaped the human brain and human culture never happened while people were out chasing something across open ground. It grew quietly in the moments they were forced to sit still, huddled inside a cave, eyes fixed on the gray sky, waiting for it to break. The first thing rain stole from the ancient body was its warmth, something fragile and far more precious than anyone realized at the time. A person soaked through, with no dry cloth to their name, loses heat at a startling speed. And in a world with no walls, no roof, no fire built into the floor, that single fact alone could turn an ordinary evening into a fight for survival. This is not some relic locked safely in the past. Doctors still watch this pattern closely today. Once you cross into your 30s, and later your 40s, the body grows noticeably worse at holding onto its own heat, and people living with joint pain can often feel a storm changing the air before it ever arrives, an ache that whispers hours before the first drop lands. Your ancestors were not imagining the bond between weather and the body. It is real, and it has never once let go of us. Once the fire was finally safe, ancient people did something researchers only came to fully appreciate in recent decades. They talked to one another. One well-known study followed a hunter-gatherer community deep in the Kalahari Desert, quietly recording what they spoke about under daylight, then comparing it to what filled the air once the sun disappeared. Daytime conversations stayed practical. Whose land was whose? Who needed what resource? But the moment the fire was lit at night, the entire mood shifted. Almost everything turned into stories, songs, memories passed gently back and forth. The firelight itself seemed to coax something open in people. That nightly ritual was never simply entertainment. It was how survival itself traveled from one generation into the next, carried inside something the human brain finds almost impossible to let go of, a story worth remembering. And here is the part that should really stop you. Long-running research into human longevity, the kind that has followed the same people across nearly a century of life, found that deep social bonds predict a long, healthy life better than almost anything else, better than exercise, better than diet. Your ancestors were not merely warming their hands by that fire. Without knowing a single fact about biology, they were doing the most powerful thing a human being can do to protect their own future. While the fire crackled and the stories kept coming, hands never sat idle. Archaeologists sifting through cave floors keep finding the same quiet pattern again and again. Small piles of stone flakes, half-finished tools, bone needles with tiny eyes drilled by patient hands, and delicate cords twisted slowly from plant fiber. None of this was made mid-hunt. All of it came from the long, forced stillness that rain pressed onto people. Slow, repetitive, focused work with the hands is exactly the kind of activity researchers today link to lower stress hormones and a calmer, steadier nervous system. What we now casually call a hobby was once, simply, how a person survived the rain. Deep inside certain caves, that stillness quietly turned into something even more extraordinary. People carried small lamps burning animal fat through narrow tunnels, sometimes crawling for a long stretch through total darkness, all just to paint animals onto a wall almost no one else would ever lay eyes on. Nobody paints under conditions like that on a clear day made for hunting. That kind of deep, focused creation only happens when the outside world has quietly closed every other door. Psychologists today describe a similar state, the mind finally allowed to wander freely once it slips free of constant tasks and constant screens, often producing the clearest thinking a person has all week. It turns out boredom was never truly empty. It was the space where the brain did its most important work of all. There is also a smaller, softer detail that modern sleep science keeps quietly circling back to. Firelight is warm, dim, and flickering. Nothing like the harsh blue glow so many of us stare into long after the sun goes down. That warm light naturally helps the body produce the hormone that signals it is finally time to rest. People past their mid-30s already make less of that hormone on their own, part of why falling asleep at a decent hour becomes harder with every passing year. Your ancestors, gathered around that same warm fire on every rainy night, were unknowingly living out the exact routine sleep doctors now beg us to follow. Warm, dim light, no glowing screens, and a slow, gentle unwinding before the body finally lets go into sleep. When the rain finally eased, none of that long waiting turned out to be wasted. The soft, soaked ground held the clearest animal tracks of the entire season. The rock hollows near camp had filled with fresh, clean water. Mushrooms pushed up through the softened earth, and swarms of protein-rich insects appeared almost overnight. Rain never simply took from ancient people. Quietly, patiently, it refilled the world around them while they waited it out. So if you ask what ancient humans truly did through those long stretches of rain, the honest answer is almost everything that kept them alive for the long run. They guarded their fire like it was their own heartbeat. They let their bodies finally rest. They deepened their bonds with one another through story. They let their hands slowly shape things that actually mattered. And in doing all of it, with no modern language to describe any of it, they were already living out the exact habits today's doctors, sleep researchers, and longevity scientists spend entire careers trying to convince the rest of us to return to. So maybe the next time it rains for days without end and the whole world outside feels like it has paused, that is not dead time at all. It might simply be your body, quietly asking for the very same thing it has needed since long before history was ever written down. A little less noise, a little more warmth, and a little more time spent close to the people who truly matter.